I'm Gregory Fedora, and this is the Fedora Files. I love a good story, and I love talking to people. And I love finding out what motivates them and drives them to do things. And my next guest is just like me. Her name is Lisa Gregory, and she is a freelance journalist. And I found that exciting and cool. Like, how do you get into that? Journalism. What drove her to go there? So sit back, relax, and let's hear this real life Lois Lane's tale. Here we are. We're with Lisa. Lisa, thank you for coming on the Fedora Files. I'm really excited that you're here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So we kind of met over the phone because you actually interviewed me,
Right,
and then I in turn threw it at you and said I wanted to interview you
right.
because I find it fascinating, like when people do things that they love to do and they manage to turn it into a way to make money. Because a lot of times people don't really do that. They find a job and they go to school for whatever, they get a career, but it may not necessarily be their thing that they love to do. And I think you love to do what you do.
Absolutely. I consider myself one of the luckiest people in the world. I'm
So
doing exactly what I want to do.
now tell people what you do.
I
Like,
am a freelance writer.
mhm,
I write for magazines primarily. I write for Frederick Magazine, which is how you and I met when I did the
mhm.
article on local podcasters. I write for Hagerstown Magazine, Baltimore Style, Celebrate Gettysburg, uh, Carol Magazine. That's about it. That's a good mix. I think that gives you an idea.
Yeah, all over the DMV area, basically. So
Yeah,
you're all
yeah,
over the place.
yeah.
So now I have a question. So when did you discover your love for writing? Like at what age did you realize how much you like to write?
I think as soon as I could spell,
Hmm.
and could write, I don't remember not loving to make up stories or pretend. I wrote poetry very early on. I wrote stories very early on, and I just took to it. And I knew that I wanted to be a writer, but being a creative writer, it's sort of like winning the lottery, making
Hmm.
a living at that. So I decided that I would go into journalism. That way I could do what I love, but also, as you said, make a living, support
Hmm.
myself. So that's what I did.
Cool. So now, did you go to college for writing, or did you
Hmm.
just did you so you knew right away this is what you wanted to do and you
Right.
pursued it?
Right. I started working for the local, my local hometown newspaper before I had a license, like at 14 or 15.
Oh
I was
wow.
covering sports events for them. And my mother, as my assignments grew, my mother would actually drive me to where I needed
Hmm.
to be for whatever I was covering. I was working for the local newspaper. And then while I was still in high school, United Press International asked me to work for
Hmm.
them. And from there, I worked throughout high school. And then when I got into college, they asked me to cover the University of Kentucky basketball program, which, if any of your listeners are familiar with Kentucky, that's huge.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
we
like
don't have pro sport. Yeah. And so I got to do that throughout my college years and got a lot of experience that way.
mhm. So you're like Lois Lane, you know, basically. Like you're like the
Good way of putting
reporter.
it.
Yeah, you're Superman's gal. You're like and that's so cool about the Kentucky. I'm originally from Ohio, so I understand
Okay.
the that basketball mentality there. And so I grew up not far from Kentucky, and so I understand
It's a
that
big
whole.
deal.
Yeah, it is. It's very big,
It
and
was, yeah, it would be
it
like, covering a professional team
yeah.
elsewhere.
Well,
Well,
it's
as a
kind.
college.
Yeah, and it's kind of like football is to Texas. Like people, I
Hmm.
don't know, they understand how Texas football, especially high school, like Kentucky, the basketball team there, that's like Mecca. Like
Hmm.
people, like you don't mess with that. I mean, they've made movies about
Oh,
it,
yeah. Yeah.
and so,
Yeah,
so
and sitting on the on press row, and I was at this time, which would have been, gosh, I'm 59. I was still in college. You didn't see a lot of young women on press row,
mhm,
and I remember at one point there were two of us,
Yeah.
and but I never felt like I wasn't welcomed, embraced, included. But I do remember at times sitting on press row and thinking, oh my gosh, am I really here?
Hmm.
And that's what's so great about journalism and writing. You get to sort of sit in the front row and observe really amazing, cool things. You're not part of it,
Hmm.
but you're right there. You're sort of like in the shadow or lurking around, and it's just incredibly exciting and fulfilling. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was hooked.
So yeah, you get to observe it and then you tell the story. And so that's kind of like really a cool way to do it. And it preserves it like in a way that's
Mhm,
unique.
mhm,
And
right. And, in writing about people, and I'm primarily now a feature writer. Um, I'm telling people stories, and it's so important not only to the people that read the stories, but also the people I'm writing about. There was an individual a few years ago who was a musician. He was dying of cancer, and I wrote his story. And this man had been in newspapers and in media, frequently. But the story that I did was so special to him that when he passed, they had it up on a stand by
oh
his.
wow.
So when you think about that, it sort of puts it in perspective. I'm taking
Hmm.
your life into my hands and creating a story that really is
Hmm.
yours. I'm just borrowing it. So I
Hmm.
take it all very, very seriously, or I try
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. So I'm curious, like, you've been doing this a while. Like, what is one of the interviews beside you just told us that one, but what's one of the interviews that really stuck out to you when you did this interview? You're like, you truly felt this is what I was meant to do.
Every time I think I do an
Yeah.
interview, I mean, that's sort of a not fair answer. I had one recently. I'm kind of a space geek, and I
Hmm.
had an opportunity to interview one of the engineers that were involved with the James Webb Telescope.
Oh wow.
And that was a big deal for me.
Hmm.
I thought, wow, I can't believe I'm talking to this individual. He'd been working on it for 20 years.
Oh
And,
wow.
and the excitement in his voice, it works, it works, it really works. And what that telescope is going to tell us and educate
Hmm.
us, humanity. I mean, it may
Yeah.
answer the biggest question of all. So that was pretty heady stuff.
Hmm.
But whatever, right now I'm working on an article about opioid abuse following the Civil War.
Oh wow.
And
Hmm.
that's been incredibly fascinating because you're comparing it to the epidemic we have now, but we as an American society have been here before.
Hmm.
So I love the research. I love talking to people. I love the topics. I get to choose a lot of my own topics. That's a lot of fun. But yeah, it was pretty heady stuff talking. Some people will appreciate the whole, telescope thing, others
Hmm.
won't. But for me, it was kind of a big deal.
Well, no, I mean that's actually I love seeing the pictures that they're releasing on it.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, and I can only imagine because like what was the telescope before that? The big deal that
Hubble.
they Hubble. And I remember when they were launched that, and it was such a big, and then they realized that it had one of the lenses was messed up, and
Mhm.
they didn't know until it got up there. And
Yeah.
so then they had to go back up and fit. I remember that whole deal, and just like you said, him thinking, "Oh, it works, it works." I mean, that's just they don't know how if it's going to work until it's up there, and it's billions of dollars that they've been working on, and
In
then now
20
we're
years.
yeah, in 20 years of your life, and then till it's up there, you don't know for sure. I mean, you hope and you think, but you got to talk to him, and that I mean, so that your career, your love of writing and talking with people and interviewing and writing their stories has really opened up you to get to meet a lot of really cool people.
Yeah, I
And
really have. Yeah. I for Frederick Magazine, since your Frederick based podcast, I did a piece on um the football player from the Los Angeles Rams, Rob
mhm,
Havenstein,
yeah,
who had just won the Super Bowl championship. And I got to interview his parents and the young men that he grew up with that played high school football, his high school football coach. And it was just, I'm thinking, how many people get access, and interviewing him as well.
Hmm.
And he had a great story to tell. And in talking to him, he had an incident where I think that his dog and the cat got into it. And you come to realize, he goes, I'm sorry about that. We had a moment. And I
Yeah.
thought, he's just a regular guy. He talked about
Yeah.
doing tea parties with his little girls. And,
Hmm.
so you see the real sort of celebrity
Hmm.
aspect, but then you realize we're all kind of just people, except
Yeah.
for the guy that helped with the telescope. He's kind of special.
Yeah. He's like beyond. He's superhuman.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah. No, it is, I agree. He's like a land-based astronaut. And
Yeah.
so I mean
But that's pretty cool.
yeah. That's all. I mean, to me, that's one of the things that I would geek out about, would be talking to someone
Yeah.
like that, or like I get those kind of people. Like I'm just like blown away with all the ones who are doing all the space stuff, like
Yeah.
all those billionaires who are building rockets and going, even if they're just going up for themselves. I'm still like, that's crazy cool. I'm like, I can't disparage any of them, because if I had billions, I'd be building rockets too and be
Yeah.
trying to do it. So, but so I would like, there's a lot of people out there now who do blogs and write and do these crazy, they call themselves journalists. And I'm sure you've seen them. They're on Facebook and they'll tell a story. And what advice would you give to someone, a young person who wants to be a journalist, but is seen kind of like that? Because there are really good journalists, and then there's these like clickbait type
Mhm.
of, they're not really journalism. It's just like copying Wikipedia and spewing it out again, but then putting stupid pictures. So, what advice would you give to like a high school kid or someone who loves what you like, how you do, the same passion, and is looking to move forward, but has all these different, because social media is like off the charts now,
Mhm.
compared to like when you started, and compared to when I was growing up. It's just way beyond. How would you tell them to focus and what to focus on?
Well, if you're going to be a writer, I think it's really important to write.
Hmm.
And whether that's just sitting down and writing your thoughts for the day. I think it's very important. And one aspect of today's society is we're losing our ability or the art to listen. And I think a good reporter, a good journalist, a good writer, if you're writing about something or something, you really need to listen and be able to converse in a comfortable way. I think that's incredibly what you're doing right now. We're just having a conversation. Um, it's hard for me with the new technology. Back in the day, you got as many clips. I don't even know if that's a thing anymore, but you got your byline on as many things as you could. In my early days, I covered everything from the farm report to I wrote up obituaries. I just did
Mm.
it. Now it's almost like you have a platform sometimes before you're really ready for it. And that
Mhm.
concerns me a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, I went through 4 years, well, 5 years of college. I do think the face of journalism has changed.
Mhm.
When I was going through journalism school, you didn't pick a side.
Mhm.
It, it was a great honor to be so objective
Yeah.
that, I had an editor tell me when I was in college and working at the local paper. He said, if you can write an article and get letters complaining about it on both sides of the fence, then you've done your job. And I
Mhm.
sort of feel like we've lost that a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
I,
concern.
I well, I mean, like, yeah, definitely like news state. Like I try to avoid news, like TV news, just because you
Yeah.
can't pick one or the other, because basically either I like when I look up news articles online, I
Mhm.
jump from I go CNN, Fox, MSNBC, and I try and read all three article like about an event, and then
Mhm.
I'm like, okay, I've now seen three completely different opinions, and then I'm like, it's somewhere in there, and
Yeah, but
so
you shouldn't have to
you have,
go. And I appreciate the fact that you do that. I
Mhm.
think that's incredibly valuable that you're at least making that effort, but you shouldn't have to. You
Yeah,
shouldn't have to go from the right to the left to try to find the middle. And I don't want to
yeah,
get political or whatever,
yeah,
but I
exactly.
have seen a change in the profession.
Mhm.
Luckily for me, especially at this point in my life and in my career, I do human interest stories.
Yeah,
And those are a little harder to politicize or take a
yeah.
side on, and I love doing stories on people that are doing good things. I think it's
Mhm.
incredibly needed right now.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think it is, like, I think human interest stories are, like, one of the things we really, because we have so much, like, there's a lot of anger on both sides everywhere,
Mhm,
on
mhm,
basically every little opinion that's out there, and seeing, like, a real person doing something, that's kinda like what I like to do. I like to talk to people about, like, what they're really into and how they do it and why they do it, and I just, to me, it's fascinating because, like, I do what I like to do. I mean, I also have a real job that I have to do, and it's still in the vein of what I like to do, but I wish I could do more of the other stuff that I really love, but it's like, it's not really paying yet, but I still get to do what I like to do in a way, but to see people like you doing what you do, and I've talked to a lot of other people doing things, even like you, like when I go into like the monsters and ghost stuff, like the guys who are out there actually doing that and somehow making money off it. To me, that's fascinating. I'm like, good for you. You're
mhm.
hunting ghosts and you're getting paid. I I could get into that whole thing, like, the guys who have their TV shows about hunting ghosts, like, I watch them. I think they're hilarious. Same with the ones who hunt monsters, I think they're great. I enjoy them, and in my mind, I'm just like, "That is just crazy that you're getting paid to do that. I hope you appreciate that you're getting paid to do these things and yell at people that aren't there." And so, I
But
mean, I thought,
don't you I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
yeah,
don't you think that given today's technology and social media and that sort of thing, you have that opportunity. And that's something I wanted
yeah,
to say. You don't necessarily have to have a degree in journalism. It's
mhm,
more of a level playing field. Like you
yeah,
have an interest and you're good at it. You're a
mhm,
natural in conversing. And so why shouldn't you have a platform? I think it's
yeah,
just it's a responsibility
mhm.
and it needs to be treated as so.
Yeah, and I think a lot of kids need to realize that as well, because I mean, I have kids and they watch these YouTube shows, and
Mhm.
some of them are like, I don't want to name the bad ones, but there's a guy, Mr. Beast, who does a show that to me is fascinating. That this guy is doing a lot of good with what he's got, and to me, I applaud people like that. And then there's others that are just doing insanity things that I'm just like, what? And I go, why are you watching? And I ask my kids why they watch it, what is the value of it,
Yeah.
and do you want to be like that person? And thankfully, they've said no. They just kind of find it entertaining. But I was like,
Mm.
good, good, because I don't want you doing that. But same
But
with
you're
journalism.
there, you're monitoring it, you're discussing it, it's not that it can't be out there, it's
Yeah,
how parents handle it.
yeah,
You're aware of what they're watching, you discuss it, I think that's incredibly important
yeah.
as
Well,
an older.
yeah. Well, I think the same thing with like journalists and journalism, like uh like my oldest son's in college now. And I mean he's a lot like me in that he would look up articles and he would look at all the different articles.
Mhm,
And he would make an opinion off of reading all these and be like, well, I really think it's this. I'm like, well, and we'd be like, well, where'd you get that? And he'd say, well, I looked here, here, and here, and they said this is this, and I kind of think it's here, not here and here, to this, he more centric. And I was like, well, that's pretty true. And I think journalists should probably be the same way. I know it is difficult because I am opinionated, and I'm sure you've had to run into the difficulty of holding back your opinion when writing, when trying to tell the story to somebody, even a human interest. There's times when you kind of probably had to hold yourself back a little because you're like, I want to get the story out, not what I thought of the story.
mhm. Actually, I think because of the generation that I came from, for me, it isn't that much of a problem.
Hmm.
I really feel like it's your story. I'm just telling it.
Yeah.
Again, if I was covering politics or sports or something else, it might be a different approach.
Mhm.
But I think there's, oh, how do I want to say this? There's too much me.
Mhm.
You know, one of the joys of being a writer is that I get to hide in the shadows and observe. I'm a fly on the wall.
Mhm.
And in the last few years, I've been asked to include bios with my articles. I never had to do that. It's like, who cares about me? Or
Yeah.
what I think. But I realize the world is changing, especially with social media. But kudos to you
Mhm.
for the way you're
Oh.
raising your children and for, discussing, talk, communicate. It's so
Mhm.
important.
Well, I try. I mean, I like to talk, which you kind of already know, and I'm a talker. I will I will talk to anyone. I got plans. Like I think in a couple weeks you're going to hear an episode of mine that I want you to give me your opinion on it. I'll make sure I send it to you. But when it
Please
comes
do.
out, it's
Please
some
do.
yeah, it's a little bit different than anything I've done, and it's just stuck in my head that I want to do it. I'm gonna see how it may completely flop, but or it might be amazing. I don't know. We'll find out. But
Well, follow
I
that creative itch,
yeah,
go with it. And that's the beauty of the creative process, the journey that we go on.
oh exactly, and so like same with you. Like how do you? I'm curious. How do you choose what who you interview or what stories you go to? What stories attract? I know human interest, but is there a particular kind of human interest that attracts you the most?
Well, with the magazines that I work for, I do get assignments and they'll say, we've got this, are you interested? And maybe I am, maybe I'm not. You also within freelance, you pitch story ideas, you come up with ideas and you take them to the different magazines and this is the beauty of social media. I find a lot of good ideas on the different Facebook pages and sites and I've come up with a lot of good story ideas.
Mhm.
Um, you know, I each one, there's always something with each article that I do that I learn something new, I meet different people. I will say I'm a little drawn to history, I've
Mhm.
noticed, um, and how it relates to current days or current times. I
Mhm.
do find that interesting. And Celebrate Gettysburg really comes in handy for that because
Yeah.
a lot of history there.
Oh, definitely.
Um,
And
go ahead.
no, God, no. I was like,
No,
good.
no, that's yeah,
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I mean, well, there's a lot of history. Like, and I like history as well. Well, there you go. But so
Well, I love
I
the
see
fact
it.
that you do the folklore. I
Yeah.
told you that when I wrote and I probably shouldn't say this publicly, but when I wrote the podcast article for Frederick Magazine, you were one of my favorites. And I
Hmm.
had to include so many, and I wish I could have done so much more with what you were doing
Hmm.
because I really found it interesting, especially the folklore
Yeah.
aspect of it.
Yeah.
So,
And I just released one about the whole story of the Snallygaster because, like, that's a folklore that's unique to
oh yeah,
Maryland,
oh
and
yeah.
I'd never even heard of it till I moved here. And the fascinating thing was, I live like I don't want to give exactly where I live, but I live right by South Mountain, and
Oh,
that's where the Snallygaster lived. And I was like, we're sitting there, and I think I was up on South Mountain doing a hike, and I saw a little plaque about the Snallygaster. I'm like, what is that?
I know.
And I was like, I've never heard of it. And then I started researching. I was like, this is unbelievable. Like, this is like the president was interested, Smithsonian Institute. I'm like, why is nobody talking about that? Everybody talks about Bigfoot, but nobody talks about this. And I'm like, this
Uh-huh.
is crazy. And
Little
like,
gem that you found, little
yeah,
diamond that you could take and yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I was like
I
that.
never heard of it. I've lived in Maryland for 30 years. I'd never heard of it.
Yeah. And now it's like, the more I research it, the more crazier there is stuff about
all connected to it. And I'm like, this is insane. I go, Maryland needs to really jump on it because
I
like
know.
all these other state.
Snallygaster Festival.
Yeah, well, I mean, they have one
Do
in
they have one?
DC, but they have a Snallygaster in DC, but it's just like a beer festival, but it's
Okay.
not really about the Snallygaster other than the name. And but like New Jersey has the Jersey Devil,
Mhm.
West Virginia has Mothman,
Mothman.
and
Mhm.
out west has Bigfoot, Florida has a skunk ape, So, but and they all celebrate them. But Maryland, it's like, man, I go, whoever's the next governor, I need to write and be like, you need to do something. Like
It's
I
a
don't.
tourist opportunity. Bring some
It it,
tourism in,
it seriously is. You could
right?
do like do sn-
Right.
like do a Snallygaster tour, through Maryland because it wasn't just spotted in Frederick. It was spotted in
Yeah.
other places as well. So they're missing an opportunity. You
Well, you
you
need
should
to get
you
on
should
that,
do an
please.
yeah, well, you need to do another story on the Snally guy, because there's actually a lady in Frederick who's opening a Snallygaster museum.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh,
and
that's
so
the see, and that's how I get story ideas.
so
See?
I will get you her information.
Please.
I've actually had her on my show, and she is fascinating, and she's such a neat person, so cool, and just a lot. She's a lot of fun, and she listens to my show, so now she's probably like, oh crud, but so but I will send her I'll
Yes,
send
please.
you her information and then get you to her. But yeah, so it's not completely open yet, but she's in the process. So
Okay. Well, yeah, we got time. We got time.
oh
Yeah,
yeah,
that
no,
sounds
yeah,
great. Please do. Please
yeah.
do.
Now I know I said I wouldn't keep you long because you gotta write, you got things to do, and so I don't want to keep you from that.
So do
And
you.
yeah, well, I thank you for coming on because I know you're
Thank you
busy,
for having me.
and
Thank you.
I hopefully maybe you'll come back sometime and we can talk some more and dive into more of your writings and more stuff, and maybe if you have an article you've written or you were writing that you really want people to know about, you can come on and tell me all about it and plug it. I'm more than happy to push it out
Well,
there.
I'm actually becoming a published creative writer, fiction writer.
Oh,
And I have my second story coming out. I belong to a writers group in Gettysburg called the Gettysburg Writers Brigade.
hmm,
And the name of the book will be coming out it's an anthology of
hmm.
fiction stories, and it's coming out in November, and it's called On Hollowed Ground. And this
Okay.
my second one. And I'm really excited because it's something new and different. Kind of
Yeah.
like what you're doing, all the different things you're doing.
Yeah. Well, I need to get you'll have to send me a link to where people can buy it, and I'll put that in the comments so people can check it out. But definitely, because that's
Mhm. And I would be glad to come and read some of it or.
oh yeah, definitely. Well, let's set this up because I'd love to have you share it. I love that kind of stuff. That's awesome. That's very exciting. So again, I thank you for coming. And those of you listening or watching or however you found us, thank you for checking in and checking it out. Please check the links below for Lisa's stuff. And as always, stay safe and keep searching.
Fedora Files. Check out fedoracrt.com today.